dangerous.
If they would have instituted a recall, then my son would have never gotten sick.
About 1 in 4 pieces of raw chicken carries salmonella.
The strains of salmonella are tougher, stronger, and many of them are antibiotic resistant.
We don't have laws that are protecting us.
About millions of birds at a single farm, producing thousands of tons of litter.
These industries could give animals more space or reduce their numbers, but that would lower their profits. Their wants and needs come second to profit, especially in factory farms.
Buried so deep and for so long in this wet manure that it had engulfed her body like a quicksand, like she had sucked down into it. The flies and bugs from the manure are all over her skin.
The right thing is to stop what they're currently doing. Stop the disposal of waste. The land is not a toilet.
We are now facing a future in which a simple scrape can turn into a mortal wound.
I began to receive death threats, anonymous calls.
Going up against these corporations is dangerous.
There was a lineup of people in my office with tears in their eyes.
The notion that our food system is the safest in the world is nothing more than a lie.
And requested to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation from her company. Meat processing is a dangerous job in America. Workers are 3 times more likely to get seriously injured than the average American worker. More likely to get seriously injured than people who work in oil and gas drilling, industrial building construction, or people who operate sawmills. And that was before the COVID pandemic tore through meat plants. Meat processing has a long history of safety issues. Using a sharp tool quickly and close to other people is dangerous.
When a worker becomes ill or gets injured, he's cast aside. And hundreds of jobless men fight to replace him.
Of human trafficking, some of them are kids.
It's probably one of these things that you just don't want to know. Do you suspect that this is going on? Probably. But do you really want to try digging into it?
We've got these kids.
But more importantly, he came out of the plant radicalized by what happened to the workers.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel here, and today I'm back with another anti-capitalism true crime deep dive video on the topic of the bird, eggs, and poultry industry files, chickens, turkeys, etc., capitalism, pollution, etc. So let's get started into this YouTube video. But before we get started, all my YouTube videos related to this topic will be linked down below in the video description right now, as well as on the screen right now if you'd like to check them out. So let's get started into this video topic. The Animal Welfare Act, despite its name, provides no significant protection to farmed animals whose bodies are used for food, furs, or skins. This means animals such as cows, chickens, pigs, foxes, turkeys, mink are not protected by this law. These animals are not entitled to federal protection of humane conditions in America. Rather than protecting these animals from cruelty, the United States enables fur industry and the factory farm agriculture industry, aka the meat industry, to continue what they're deemed common farming practices. A common farming practice is an action that is seen as common throughout farms and is thereby legal. The exemption takes no stance on whether or not the action is humane or causes suffering to the animal overall. There are numerous ways in which farms utilize common farming practice laws to maximize efficiency, maximize capitalism profits in their operations without consideration of animal welfare. Here are some examples of the few different types of cruelty farmed animals, specifically birds, in the poultry industry are legally allowed to endure as common farming practices. Chickens. Egg-laying hens have their sensitive beaks chopped off without pain relief, often leaving them in pain for the rest of their lives. Selective breeding forces chickens to grow so unnaturally big and quick that they are unable to support themselves to walk. Turkeys, also bred to grow faster than nature intended. Turkeys are allowed to suffer from leg deformities that prohibit ambulation when slaughtered. These animals are trailered through electrified water or sometimes boiled while they're still alive. Although many of these common farming practices would be considered illegal animal cruelty and animal abuse, or neglect for animals such as cats or dogs that are pets. Farm animals are not protected. Beyond what occurs to these animals when they are alive, their deaths are not only just as horrific, and for birds and factory farms, just as legal. The Humane Methods of Slaughter Act requires that these animals up for slaughter be unconscious or unable to feel pain during the act. In it, there are provocations where the humane slaughter of cows, pigs, horses, mules, and sheep, goats, etc. But just as the Animal Welfare Act does not cover farmed animals, the HMSA does not provide any protection against inhumane slaughter of poultry, chickens, and other poultry birds in general, such as turkeys, which constitutes 98% of animals slaughtered in America. This is why the former Gras cruel. Is former Gras cruel? The production of former Gras has drawn controversy around the world for its unnecessarily and cruel production methods, including shoving hot, long metal tubes down the throats of ducks and geese multiple times throughout the day and pumping their stomachs full of calorie-dense foods, pumping up to 2.2 pounds of grain and fat into their stomachs, or geese 3 times a day, up to 4 pounds daily. The force feeding causes these birds' livers to swell up to 10 times their normal size. Many birds have difficulty standing because their engorged livers distended their stomachs, and they may tear out their own feathers in frustration and attack other birds out of stress. PETA has released how Hudson Valley photograph appears on the menu prestage at the New York restaurant Gordon Ramsay at the London. The group have released undercover footage from the farm. The birds are kept in tiny cages and crowded sheds. Unable to bathe or groom themselves, they become coated with excrement mixed with oils that would normally protect their feathers from water. Other health problems include damage to the esophagus, fungal infections, diarrhea, impaired liver function, heat stress, lesions, and fractures of the sternum. Some ducks die of aspiration from pneumonia, which occurs when grain is forced into the duck's lungs or when birds choke on their own vomit. In one study, birds force-fed for photographs had the mortality rate up to 20 times that of a control group of birds that were not force-fed. Since photographs is made from the livers of the male ducks, all the female ducklings, 40 million of them each year, in France alone, are useless to the meat industry and are therefore simply tossed into grinders live so their bodies can be processed into fertilizer or cat food. Same goes with male baby chickens, aka roosters, in the chicken industry. Chick culling, or unwanted chick killing, is the process of separating and killing unwanted male and unhealthy female chicks, for which the intensive animal agricultural farming industry has no use for them. It occurs in all industrialized egg production industries as well, whether free-range, organic, or battery cage. Worldwide, about 7 billion male chicks are culled each year in the egg industries. In these capitalism atrocities, not only this, but the mother hens are trapped in small-ass cages and lose their feathers from stress and bullying among birds and turkeys from them trying to establish a hierarchy happens, leaving birds with open wounds and sores everywhere and can lead to their death. Welfare issues for quail. Many quail, both meat and egg-laying birds, are kept in battery cages. These are barren wire cages that do not allow birds to properly perform their natural behaviors, such as foraging and dust bathing. When quail are startled, they fly up in the air and hit their heads on the roof of these cages. Quail are often reared in large barns where thousands of birds are kept in overcrowded conditions and barren conditions. These systems are used mostly for quail reared for meat. Egg-laying quail are kept in barns in some farms, but is less common because egg collecting is more difficult. Quail will lay their eggs in litter rather than in a designated nest area. One thing that both battery cage and intensive barn systems have in common is a lack of space for birds, resulting in horrible farming conditions. As well, wild quail spend most of their lives hidden among the grass. Having cover from potential predators is important for them. These barren, open farming conditions of intensive farming do not provide quail with any cover, and they are easily startled by the farm workers and can hurt themselves. And when it comes to the health of eggs in your report, egg consumption, intake of 7 or more eggs per week was associated with a 58% increased risk increased risk of type 2 diabetes in men and a 77% increased risk of type 2 diabetes in women after adjustment for potential co-founders. About 60% of calories in eggs are from fat, much of which is from saturated fat. Eggs are also loaded with cholesterols, about 200 milligrams for an average egg size. That's more than double the amount of a Big Mac. Fat and cholesterol contribute to heart disease as well, which is one of the main causes of death in the United States alone. We all know that factory farming is truly bad, and animal abuse and human rights abuses run rampant. Cargill is also the world's top 3 meat packers, a practice where missteps can be fatal. In 2007, people died, 29 were sickened, and 3 women had stillbirth or miscarriages linked to a listeria outbreak in sliced turkey from a Cargill processing plant in Texas. The same year, a 3-year-old girl died. 140 others became ill after eating E-Coli tainted contaminated meat supplied by Cargill meat packaging plant. That a number of previous citations for fecal contamination, a salmonella outbreak across 37 states in 2011 resulted in another death linked to Cargill processed meat. So the victims of capitalism, profits over lives as usual. Now, is chicken healthy for you? According to research, antibiotics are frequently given to conventionally reared hens to help them grow faster or to combat the effects of overcrowding and Holocaust-like conditions. Antibiotic overuse has resulted in an increase of the likelihood of microorganisms acquiring antibiotic-resistant arsenic was identified to be up to 55% of raw chicken products examined from supermarkets. Netflix documentary Poisoned shed lights on grocery store chicken contamination. According to the CDC, each year, nearly 1 million Americans experience food poisoning from contaminated chicken. Interestingly, the regulatory agencies have long placed the responsibility for food safety on customers and consumers. As recently as 2021, chicken producers were still legally permitted to sell chicken they knew to be contaminated with the salmonella bacteria, as the USDA stance was that the consumers can cook the meat to kill the bacteria. The industrialized meat industry in the U.S. is more prone to outbreak, largely because livestock densities are higher, human rights and animal abuses are running rampant, low-pay wage slaves and working violation conditions, and hygiene standards lower because profits over everything is the thing with capitalism system. Antibiotics are used liberally and not just to treat unwell livestock, but to stop infections developing as well. Using antibiotics in food production enables bacteria to develop resistance scientifically, meaning the drugs will be less effective in humans. Antibiotic resistance is one of the biggest public global health threats, estimated to kill up to 700,000 people a year. Turning 800-pound animal or even a 5-pound chicken into chicken tenders for the supermarket checkout or fast food restaurant industry is in its nature demanding physical labor in bloody, greasy surroundings. 2 amputations a week. The cost of workers working in a U.S. meat plant amputations, fractured fingers, second-degree burns, and head trauma are just some of the serious injuries sustained and suffered by U.S. meat plant workers every week. U.S. meat workers are already 3 times more likely to suffer serious injuries than the average American worker. In an evaluation of a South Carolina processing plant, researchers found an alarming rate of 42% of workers suffering from carpal tunnel syndrome, a disease that occurs when major hand nerves is squeezed or strained. 86% of poultry workers in one survey said they suffer hand and wrist pain, swelling, numbness, inability to close hand. And on July 3rd, 2015, an employee of Tyson Foods was preparing for work at the line when a tender clipping station at the company's poultry processing plant in Missouri, the stand slipped, pinching her middle finger between the frame and processing line. Her finger was instantly amputated between the nail bed and first knuckle. 2 similar incidents happened and occurred in Wisconsin poultry processing plants between 2015 and August 31st, 2017, according to OSHA. The meat and processing industry has the 8th highest number of severe injuries reports of all industries in 2015. According to a 2017 Governmental Accountability Office report study, in a 2016 poultry processing alone had a higher rate of injuries and illnesses than logging, coal mining, and oil and gas extraction industries. According to data from the Better Business Bureau of Statistics, Wisconsin has dozens of small and medium-sized plants and major companies. The largest Wisconsin poultry processing plant reported 8 serious injuries since 2015. According to OSHA, including 2 finger amputations and 1 person who possibly succumbed to heat stroke. You can go back to The Jungle, a book by Upton Sinclair, and read about the horrendous conditions in the meat processing industry. For the over 300,000 poultry workers in the United States alone, clocking in doesn't mean facing these hazards. It also means another day of working in blistering speeds to satisfy the country's colossal appetite for chicken and other birds. Working in the meat and poultry slaughter and processing plants continue to face hazardous conditions, including sharp knives in close quarters, slippery floors, and chemical exposures. Poultry dust is used to describe dust, including biological agents, that is produced from work activities in poultry farms. It contains poultry feces, feathers, dander, bacteria, endotoxin, fungi, spores, and mites. The decomposition of biological materials may produce gases such as ammonia, hydrogen sulfate, and carbon dioxide that may also cause respiratory health problems. Studies into this conducted among poultry workers have documented the prevalence of asthma varying between 1% to 43% for self-reported asthma and 6% to 14% for asthma diagnosed using specimentory. The prevalence of chronic bronchitis in various studies among poultry workers has varied between 4.4% to 21%. A study done to assess the respiratory symptoms and lung function of Norwegian farmers reported into the fold increases in odds of chronic bronchitis among poultry farmers compared to crop farmers. Similarly, a significantly increased risk of chronic bronchitis reported in South African poultry workers. With medium and high dust exposure, the prevalence of work-related chronic bronchitis was higher in poultry handlers, 15.5%, as compared to other work exposed to organic dust in the UK study. Other acute chronic work-related symptoms common in poultry workers include sneezing, coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, eye irritation, flu-like symptoms and illnesses, chest tightness, dry throat, dry nose, nosebleeds, nose bleeding, headaches, and fever. Poultry processor ordered to pay millions of dollars over child labor violations and wage theft. Children as young as 14 drove power lifters and used sharp knives to debone poultry. Between 2020 and 2023, the department obtained judgments against 3 La Pente poultry processing companies, requiring them to pay more than $1.2 million for denying overtime wages to 113 workers deliberately and using intimidation and other things to hide wage thefts. PBS looked at human trafficking at egg farms, the arrest and conviction of several individuals who smuggled South Central American teens into the country and forced them to work at Trailnum's Farms, Ohio egg production facilities. Frontline's investigation focuses on a group of Guatemalan teens who were smuggled into the country, then forced to work long hours in filthy conditions with low pay at chicken farms, live at squalid trailers in Madison County, and had a significant portion of their paychecks doxed, directed to the individuals who arranged the trip and jobs. Multiple reports have helped paint a picture just how exploitative and abusive the global meat industry is as a whole towards human beings. In 2021, one investigation by The Guardian found that meat companies in Europe have been hiring thousands of workers, many of them migrants, through subcontractors and agencies, and then subjecting them to inferior pay and conditions. Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in the UK profit from human rights abuses and indigenous land theft in Brazil. That's according to a new report that details human rights abuses in a chicken supply chain from Brazil to Europe. The report comes amid violence against indigenous communities in Brazil, and specifically in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, where rampant deforestation and violent attacks against Guarani Coata and continue to escalate. According to the report, the supply chain workers like this, La Corporata Industrio, Brazil's fourth largest chicken slaughtering company, is a significant buyer of Brasilia do Sul soy, which uses it to feed its chickens that it sells internationally. Westbridge Foods, a British poultry supplier, buys thousands of tons of chickens from the supply supermarkets like Sainsbury's and Aldi, as well as restaurants like Kentucky Fried Chicken. Also buying from La Corporata is German firm Pulsation Food, which supplies pet food and chicken in the dog and pet food industry. The Quarry Cause fight is part of a larger global effort to protect land and the environment, as research shows that indigenous land stewardship is crucial to preserving biodiversity and combating climate change as a whole. Since 2003, over 500 indigenous people have been killed in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, more than any other region, and a third of all indigenous killings in Brazil during that time, and primarily due to expanding agricultural businesses. Chicken, turkey, duck, geese, etc. versus the wildlife biodiversity as a whole. The environmental costs of eating poultry. Chicken is playing an increasingly large role in the American diet as people trade red meat for more white meat poultry. Americans now eat more chicken per capita than beef and pork. In 2014, Americans ate 83 pounds of chicken per person per year, twice as much as they consumed in the 1970s. This growing appetite for chicken and other birds is a major cause for concern, given the devastating environmental impacts of chicken production. It is a common misconception that chickens don't contribute to climate change because, unlike cows, their digestive systems and processes don't produce methane gas. However, greenhouse gases are still emitted in order to grow chicken feed, including CO2 from burning fossil fuels and nitric oxide from fertilizer application. Chicken manure and chicken poop also releases nitrous oxide, a GHG that is even more potent than methane and has 298 times the global warming potential of CO2 over a 100-year period. Chicken meat is usually processed into a variety of products, from boneless and skinless meat to chicken nuggets. All of these processing steps require high energy and water input, contributing significantly to the GHG footprint of chicken production. A large-scale farm producing 600,000 chickens per year produces over 3,300 tons of manure waste containing 72,000 pounds of nitrogen. New investigation: recent explosion of poultry factory farming in North Carolina piles manure from 515 million chickens into waste from 9.7 million hogs. North Carolina, a state known for the devastating environmental and public health impacts of industrial-scale hog, pig industry, meat production, pork industry, has now been more than twice as many poultry farming as swine operations, according to a new investigation from the environmental working group Waterkeeper Alliance. The group's research found that in 2018, manure from 515 million chickens and turkeys joined the waste from 9.7 million hogs, already fouling waters and threatening biodiversity in North Carolina's health as a whole. Nutrient pollution from the nitrates and phosphorus found in farm animal waste can cause issues like toxic algae blooms that kill fish and other marine life, aquatic biodiversity, leaving dead zones everywhere, choking out native plants, and contaminating drinking water, making it unsuitable to drink or use. Due to the rapid growth of the industry, poultry operations are now a much larger source of nutrient pollution in North Carolina than swine farms. Poultry waste, which is mixed with carcasses and bedding from form resistant called dry litter is stored in large piles before being applied to farm fields, and it can be easily blown by wind or washed by rain into nearby rivers, contaminating it. There is a wide range of air emissions from high-density poultry farming, including ammonia, particulate matter, and bioerosis. As documented in several studies, air contaminants from the poultry production, including ammonia, hydrogen sulfate, and other odor-causing compounds, and particulate matter, increase risk of pneumonia in residents living nearby poultry farms. Living near poultry farms is associated with an 11% increased risk of CAP, possibly resulting from changes in the upper respiratory tract, microbiota composition in susceptible individuals. Poultry major impacts on land degradation result from the production of their grain-intensive feed. Chicken production also poses a threat of avian biodiversity, as chickens are susceptible to diseases and viruses and act as vectors of disease transmission to avian wildlife. Federal judge finds poultry companies chicken poop polluted Oklahoma's scenic rivers. A U.S. District Court judge has ruled that 9 poultry companies operating across parts of western Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma have generated chicken manure used as fertilizer that's caused excessive phosphorus runoff polluting Lake Tenkiller, the Illinois River, and other scenic waterways in Oklahoma. Oklahoma brought in the case against 14 defendants in 2005 after years of earlier attempts to resolve phosphorus-related pollution issues failed. The companies in this lawsuit are Tyson Food Inc., Tyson Poultry Inc., Tyson Chicken Inc., Cobb Vetris Inc., Calmaine Foods Inc., Cargill Inc., Cargill Turkey Production, George's Inc., George's Farms Inc., Peterson Farms Inc., and Simon Foods Inc. In the ruling, the judge found that each defendant maintains significantly poultry operation in the Illinois River watershed, which covers more than 1 million acres in parts of the northeastern Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas. Slightly more than half of the watershed, about 576,000 acres, is located in Oklahoma. Mountains control over virtually all central aspects of poultry production, including the activities of their contract growers. Enriched with the exception of defendant Peterson and Calmaine, continues to generate significant quantities of phosphorus-rich poultry waste. Applies a measure of the poultry waste on lands within the watershed that creates an environmentally significant amount of phosphorus runoff that has and still is a significant source of harm to watershed waters, has known or has had a reason to know that the application of poultry waste as a fertilizer to watershed lands were and are a threat. The judge ruled phosphorus concentrations in watershed streams and rivers in Lake Tenkiller are elevated beyond natural levels, prompting significant increases in algae bloom growths and limiting its beneficial uses both for aquatic wildlife biodiversity and human needs. The judge backed Oklahoma's arguments that defendants violate state and federal nuisance status, Oklahoma's law bearing pollution of its air, land, or waters, and they should be penalized accordingly. Factory farms often have multiple industrial-scale sheds, each as large as 36,000 feet, containing hundreds of thousands of birds in total, furthering expanding the footprint of chicken production. The climate change, number one cause of climate change is capitalism. Throughout the broil belt region, chicken production has destroyed natural habitat for native wildlife and biodiversity as a whole. American consumption of chicken uses 19,000 square miles of land equal to the land area of Maryland, Hawaii, Delaware combined. Water pollution from factory farms has diminished water availability, particularly threatened species like the hellbender and Gulf sturgeon. North America's largest amphibian faces drastic population declines as the aquatic habitat it depends on becomes too polluted to sustain life. Pesticide and fertilizer runoff pollution causes dead zones and also creates sensitive amphibian species like the Yosemite toad, and endangers them, which are especially susceptible to aquatic pathogens.